Hey guys, I'm Mark, and today is a very exciting day because I'm going to be harvesting my hot peppers today. Last night we had our first frost of the season. Today is November 3rd, and I knew that it was coming, so I went ahead and I covered over all these pepper plants with frost blankets that we use down at the nursery in the springtime. They work very well this time of year also. It just kind of extends things out a little bit if you don't have time to get to certain things. But you can see around the rest of the garden, a lot of the tomato plants got burnt and they're just done. But the frost blankets worked really well in protecting these guys and gave me the opportunity to come out here today and get into them and harvest everything. I did a pepper video on this bed of peppers earlier in the season where I go through variety by variety and I tell you a little bit about each one and how I grow them. But this is the last day that they're going to be standing. You can see they've put on a lot of growth throughout the season. We have one over there that got over, it was like 8 feet tall before it fell over. I'm 6 feet tall, and you can see this one's quite a bit taller than me. But it's going to be a good time of year. It's going to be a good time to take these down and to actually harvest them. It makes it a whole lot easier. I prefer to sort of wait until late fall to do this instead of like continually harvesting throughout the season because I just like to do things all at once. I like a big harvest, that way I can process and do what I need to do and not have to do things over again. I did take one smaller harvest off of these guys earlier in the season that I gave away to a friend of mine, but pretty much relative one to the next, they've all packed on a lot of fruit. I didn't take all the fruit off one plant and then leave all the fruits on the rest of them. It was a little bit of fruit off of each one, so things are still very relative in terms of production from one plant to the next. So these plants are not, these are not single plants in each cage. What I do have is I have 4 plants in each one, spaced about 12 to 16 inches apart on the inside of this tomato cage. These cages were made to grow tomatoes in, but I repurposed them for growing hot peppers, and I think they worked really well. So that's it, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and tear into these guys. It's gonna be very easy to do because I don't have to worry about breaking branches and things. I'm just gonna go ahead and pull all the cages down and pick off what I need to, and that's probably gonna make harvest 5 to 10 times faster, just not having to worry about being delicate. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull the peppers off of each plant. I'm gonna keep them separated, and then I'm gonna show you in a little while what each plant actually produced relative to the next. So I'll see you guys in a little while. All right, guys, well, here we are several days later. I would have liked to do the part 2 of this video a little bit earlier on, but such is the way of things. So some of these peppers are a little bit worse for wear, but in my situation, I'm gonna be drying a lot of these guys out, so it's really not a big deal at all for me. Overall, I'll just go over just the harvest itself, and then I'm gonna go over variety by variety and tell you a little bit about each one, and then what I'm gonna use these peppers with from there, how I'm actually gonna process them, and what the future is going to be for these guys. So the harvest was pretty good, as you can see. A lot of the peppers that were pulled off have color to them. So you're going to see that there's not a whole lot of green on this table or in the back of this truck, with the exception of like the Serranos and the jalapeno peppers. Typically you'll see those eaten green in a lot of places, and that's just fine like that. But for the most part, I just pulled off everything that was showing color or fully ripe. That said, there were a lot more peppers left on the plant still. Probably 2/3 of the total peppers that were on the plants I left up there. This is basically about a third, if not less than that. But I just figured I'd leave the green peppers because I've got enough as it is with the ones that are ripe. So to start off with, I guess we'll start off with the front here, and we'll move our way back. I've got signs on each box of what they are if you want to look them up later on. But the first one we'll start with is the Lantern Red Jalapeno. Habanero, excuse me. This is probably the top performing hot pepper that I had. Probably the one that I'm happiest with. It just looked like a Christmas tree full of peppers. The red just all throughout the dark green. I mean, it was just an exceptional plant. Very tall plant, and you can see one plant produced 3 boxes full of peppers. Now, I did go through and pick out over the past couple days some of the ones that have turned bad while they were sitting in these boxes, but it wasn't all too many. There was a little bit more than this to begin with, but now we're down to roughly 3 boxes here. And when I say one plant, I mean one tomato cage. So you saw the tomato cages that were up there, and in each tomato cage I've got 4 plants. So if you're just planting one plant, you got to take that into consideration. I mean, they sort of choked each other out a little bit. There was some competition going on. which probably bumped the yield back a little bit from plant to plant. But if you just have one plant, I think you get a pretty good harvest off of that just fine as well. So wonderful pepper, probably one of the ones that I'm happiest with overall. Then going over to your right is the lemon drop. That was a really fun pepper as well. Again, huge plant, enormous plant. But with that one, I noticed this year as well as last year, you have to really give that plant a lot of time to mature. They don't start turning yellow until very late in the season. So if you're going to plant the lemon drop, make sure you get it started very early if you don't have a super long growing season. Then these guys back here, they look like a banana pepper. This is one of those peppers that's a lot hotter than it looks. That's hot sunset, and that's basically what it is a hot banana pepper, but it packs a lot of heat. Very, very hot pepper as far as I'm concerned on my scale of things. I like things to be a little bit more mild. These jalapenos here, for example, have less heat to them than those guys do, at least from what I experienced out of these plants this year. But they're a great pepper, especially if you want something that's easy to pick. You can see that something like this, I was able to harvest a lot faster, at least you can imagine, than something like these back here, where there's just lots of tiny peppers that just take forever to get each one off the plants. But if you're just looking for something that's, you can snap a couple off, be done, go make dinner, then they're wonderful for that. They're also really good for pickling if you can take the heat. We'll see how they dry. I think they're a little on the big side. So if you're gonna dry them out, definitely take that into consideration and look for lower temperatures and higher airflow. Something like this, for example, will dry out very easily relative to that. But anyway, those are the hot sunsets. Jamaican chocolate. Jamaican hot chocolate or chocolate habanero. This again was a very fun plant to grow. This is the one that you saw behind me in the beginning of this video. And the color of these peppers is just unreal. It's like chocolate. It looks like a good like milk chocolate or dark chocolate color to them. And it's got an interesting sheen to it. I just love the color. Even though I can't eat them because I can't take a lot of heat, I just still appreciate looking at them, and the plant itself is just awesome. Fish pepper. This one's really interesting. This is a Baltimore, Philadelphia heirloom. The interesting part of this pepper more than anything, besides it being a local heirloom to us, is its foliage is variegated. So there's not too many variegated peppers that you see out there, but this is one of them. And the production's pretty good on it. I think the claim to fame of this is going to be flavor. Moving forward, this is the Jalapeno Emerald Fire. Now this is, last year I grew 3 different kinds of jalapenos. I grew Emerald Fire, Mucho Nacho, and then the traditional heirloom jalapeno that you can find everywhere. And this by far was the best performer. And not only did it perform well in terms of production and giving you lots of large fruits, it also was really good at not corking, not getting these little cracks on them. I mean, you can see them from here and there. About half this batch has it, but it's not nearly as bad as like last year what I had with the Mucho Nacho and with the traditional jalapeno. And the cracking doesn't hurt the flavor or anything. It's just, I think it's a little unsightly. That's just a personal opinion. But all around, very excited with this plant. And we have been, I will say, picking off of this plant all season long. That seems to be the go-to for people around the farm and myself to just go up and grab a handful of hot peppers for whatever we're making for dinner. So this plant has seen some picking on it quite a bit throughout the season, and I still have a lot left on it here in the fall. Let's see. Next, we'll talk about the Red Ember cayenne. If you're just looking for a straightforward, nothing fancy about it, cayenne pepper, then this would be a great choice. Production, as you can see, is very nice off of 1 cage. And they're just the right size too. If they're a lot bigger than this, then they can have some problems when drying them if you're not really careful. Like I mentioned before with these guys, they can, you really got to be careful you don't run into rot issues with these because the walls are a little bit thicker and it's a larger pepper and you just don't want them to be touching all too much. Whereas these guys are a little bit smaller and they'll dry out with giving you a little bit less headaches. You could also use these to make a pretty cool ristra. You see those a lot. It's another method of drying peppers. That's not how I'm going to dry these peppers. I'll talk about how I'm going to dry mine in a little while, but one way you can dry out peppers is by making what's called a ristra, where you take a string and they're basically tied onto that string and you have a a whole column of peppers just hanging and they dry out in that fashion. They're also really neat and pretty to look at, and they make great gifts. So that's another option that would be great for these guys as well. Flavor's great. Heat is right there on par with what you would expect from a regular cayenne. So just all around great, all around cayenne pepper. Next one we'll go on to is the Serrano. And the Serrano is, I think, a very underused pepper. We see at the nursery, we don't sell as many of these as I think that we should, just because of what I think about it. I think it's just a great multi-use pepper. Not only is it hot, but pickling is one of the best things that you can use this for. And the reason why I like it for pickling is because if you break it open, there's not that huge cavity in there like you would see with a lot of other hot peppers. So if you pickle it, that cavity would wind up filling up with brine traditionally, and when you go to take a bite out of it, then it's like popping a water balloon in your mouth. These are a little bit more pleasant as far as that goes. Another thing about the Serrano that I like is the production is just unbelievable. Right here in front of me is only a little bit. I mean, I could have filled this box probably 4 times over with this plant. Problem is when I was harvesting, like you saw in the beginning of this video, I didn't get it all done in one night, and I recovered the plants back up with the frost blankets, and then during the course of the night we had some pretty strong wind which blew my frost blankets off, and then a lot of these got burnt. But such is the way of things. I've already got several jars of these pickled and ready to go, so I'm not too bent out of shape about that. There's still plenty to go around, but fantastic pepper, especially if you like jalapenos, then you definitely got to try this one out. Super chili. Super chili is probably the prettiest of all of them, if I had to say, and it's kind of a it's sort of like a semi-ornamental hot pepper in that way. I mean, it's a smaller pepper. It doesn't really get that large. So if you're growing hot peppers for a patio, or even just a small garden, or even just you want to throw something in ornamentally that gets a little bit larger than your traditional ornamental pepper, then I would definitely suggest this guy. And they're hot. They're just as good as any other cayenne pepper. So I was really, really happy with that plant, and I think that next year I'm going to try to put this plant in several other places around the garden just to be something cool to look at. And the looks of peppers, to me, that is something to definitely point out, because pepper plants are one of those types of vegetables that you can grow that really look great all season long. They develop relatively less issues than something like tomatoes or potatoes or something like that. And you can just set them, forget them, and they look great all the way throughout the season, whereas a lot of other vegetables would typically, you know, you got corn, you harvest it, you got to get rid of it. You got lettuce, it gets overgrown, it gets leggy. These just look great in the landscape, whether it's your vegetable garden or just your typical garden in general. And anyway, well, we'll get on to the hot Hungarian wax. This one is pretty much identical to the hot sunset, only this is a smaller plant in the end. So if you need a compact space, if you're doing it on a patio or a small garden, then this would be a great alternative to the hot sunset. I did not mention with the hot sunset, I might have mentioned this earlier in the video, but the hot sunset pepper, there were 2 cages that I did of those, because the theory was I was going to do a lot more pickling with them. But for whatever reason this year, I think they're just too hot for me to try to attempt that. But anyway, the yield relative to the rest of them is that's just something to take into account, that there was 2 cages of those, and then everything else you see here, there was just 1 cage of each. But the hot Hungarian wax, this was a great performer all throughout the season. The issue came, and why you see that I only have a handful of peppers here now, is because this plant got overtaken by the Serrano pepper and the lemon drop up front, which were just enormous. They were like trees. And eventually this guy just got so shaded out that production just kind of followed suit. But great pepper. Again, it's one of those that's a lot hotter than it looks. I mean, you see this and you kind of think of a banana pepper, and that's not at all what you're going to be getting yourself into. But that's a great pepper, especially for production. Last but not least, this is the Carolina Reaper. This is another one that got burnt by the frost. I was only able to get a handful of fruits off this that weren't totally destroyed by the pretty heavy freeze that we had. But that's okay, because this is really capsaicin. That's what this pepper is all about. It's just super amount of heat. There's not really a whole lot of uses that I could particularly have for this. I think one use that you could have this for, I mean, let's face it, if you're going to grow a Carolina Reaper plant, you know, 3 of these will last you all winter for the most part, or something like it. But another use that if you're going to grow these, what you can do is I've heard people make deer and rabbit spray out of them it's just an organic way to keep pests out of your garden if you don't have a fence, or if the fence is not doing its full and proper job. We've got people that come into the nursery that buy these specifically for that reason. And it's kind of tricky because when those people come into the nursery, they'll buy like everything that we have. So that's always fun. But anyway, that's it, guys. That's the pepper harvest for right now. What I'm going to do from here is I'm going to dry them all. Like I said, there's a couple here that I'm going to wind up just giving away because there's some friends and family of mine that I do know love hot peppers. I'll probably gift away the a good bit of the hot sunsets, and then the jalapenos. They're always a favorite. But the rest of them I'm going to go ahead and dry. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use this this nursery cart over here. We use these for moving flowers in and around the nursery and even loading them onto the truck. They're great for that, but they also make excellent drying racks or curing racks. I just used them, this cart in particular, its last use was for curing onions, and it did an exceptional job at that, and now it's going to be used to dry the peppers out. So what I'm going to do is just lay them out in a nice even layer all the way across each shelf, and then I'm going to put a box fan upside down on the bottom shelf of that and just blow air actively throughout all the peppers, and just keep the air circulation on them, at least for a while, at least till they get dry enough that I don't have to worry about any kind of rot issues or mold issues or things like that. But then once I go ahead and dry them out and I put them into bags or net bags, then what I can do is just hold on to them for however long I need to until I've got the time to sit there and process them into eventually what I want to do is make hot sauce out of them. So they can be dry and hang for a while. When I'm ready to make hot sauce, I'll go ahead and powder them up and introduce vinegar into the picture, maybe a little bit of oil and things like that. And then they could also be used for spices as well, and even again for gifts. So that's it, guys. That's this year's harvest. I'm pretty happy with it. I'm excited about it. A lot of the work is already done, and they're picked, and they're off the plants, and they're out of the danger of the frost now. All I got to do is get them onto this drying rack, let them sit for a while, and then looking forward to enjoying them all winter long and into next year. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching my video. I hope you liked it. I'll see you next time.